Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam thumma amma ba'd. Brothers and sisters in Islam. So last week, at long last, we wrapped up the story of Prophet Adam alayhi salam. And today, inshallah, we're going to begin a new, shorter story. This one about the sons of Adam alayhi salam, Qabil and Habil. This story is related in Surah Al-Ma'idah. And it's a very different story from the one that we have spent the past 2 months discussing. The story of Adam alayhi salam, as it was related in Surah Al-Baqarah, was ultimately an optimistic story. It told us of how Adam alayhi salam and Hawa were expelled from Jannah, but it ended on a note of reassurance. It ended with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala confirming that He would be with us on earth, that our time on earth was not intended as a punishment, and that we would be rewarded for our trials. The story of Habil and Qabil is an altogether darker one. It is a tragedy. And yet it was foreshadowed repeatedly throughout the story of Adam alayhi salam when he was in paradise. Here in the story of Habil and Qabil, we find the fulfillment of the prophecy that the angels made when Allah told them that He would create humanity. They responded by noting that humanity would have those who would spread corruption and those who would shed blood. And here that prophecy comes to bear. Here we see the very first human being who spread corruption and shed blood. It all begins with Habil and Qabil, the two sons of Prophet Adam alayhi salam. Qabil was the elder, Habil was younger. And they had two very different dispositions. And so a conflict, an eventually fatal conflict, would arise between them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Ma'idah, وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ ابْنَيْ آدَمَ بِالْحَقِّ إِذْ قَرَّبَا قُرْبَانًا فَتُقُبِّلَ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا وَلَمْ يُتَقَبَّلْ مِنَ الْآخَرِ فَقَالَ لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ قَالَ إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. This is how the story begins. And relate to them, there's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking, and relate to them the story of the sons of Adam. Relate to them the story with purpose. They came and presented to Allah. They sought to get closer to Allah by presenting the qurban, right? The sacrifice, an offering to Allah. It was accepted from one of them and rejected from the other. And so the one from whom it was rejected, he said to the one from whom it was accepted, he said, I will kill you. Right? I will kill you. And the response was, Allah accepts from those who have taqwa, right? Those who are God conscious, God fearing. So there's a lot to break down in this verse. And it's worth noting that much of what we know about the story of Habil and Qabil doesn't actually come from the Quran itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shares with us a minimum amount of details about the story. And so there are accounts outside of the Quran that came from the Mufassirun, from the classical scholars of tafsir, and also from the companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, that fill in some of the details. Right? So for example, the first question that we might ask is, well, why were Habil and Qabil, why were they presenting this sacrifice, this offering? Now, according to the accounts of some of the scholars of the Quran and from some of the companions, the conflict between them arose over the issue of marriage. The very first generation after Adam alayhi salam and Hawa, they existed in pairs. So Hawa gave birth in pairs. She would give birth to a son and a daughter. So he had pairs of them. Now, of course, we're forbidden from marrying our siblings, our brothers and sisters. But an exception was made for the very first generation, we are told. so that, the population of the earth could begin. So it was that if no twin could marry the other twin, so a twin brother could not marry his twin sister, but they could marry from another pair. They could marry from another pair. So Habil was instructed to marry the twin sister of Qabil, and Qabil to marry the twin sister of Habil. Now, Qabil did not accept this because he thought that his own twin sister, that Habil was instructed to marry, was more attractive, and he wanted her for himself. And so he rejected the command that was given to them. And so Adam alayhi salam, he told them to resolve the conflict. He didn't want to make a decision himself. He didn't want to favor one son over the other. So he told them to resolve the conflict by presenting a sacrifice to Allah. And whose ever sacrifice Allah accepted, he would get her hand in marriage. So this is the account that is given to us by some of the companions and by some of the scholars of the Quran. But these details don't actually appear in the surah itself. The Quran is silent about this context. So they presented the offering. Now Habil, we're told, he had a flock. He was a shepherd, of sheep and other livestock. And so he found the very best of what he had and sacrificed it and presented it to Allah. Qabil, on the other hand, who was a farmer who had crops, he found the cheapest, the most spoiled things he had. Basically, the things that he didn't want. Because he rationalized it. He said, well, Allah doesn't really need this from me. So I'll give him what I don't need. Right? So Qabil rationalized this, and so he put together an offering of the cheapest, the lowest quality plants that he had. And he presented this. So one of these offerings was accepted. Right? And that was the offering of Habil. Right? Not Qabil. And this inflamed the fires of jealousy in Qabil. Now Qabil, he had many issues with his brother. So he had a long-standing problem with his brother, which is that he was jealous of his brother. He felt that Habil, he got everything. Right? So first Habil gets the marriage, he gets the better marriage, and now it's his offering that gets accepted and not mine. And instead of reflecting on why his offering wasn't accepted, Qabil immediately blames Habil. Right? And this is a very familiar story. This is a story that has been repeated an infinite number of times throughout the history of humanity. Right? This is not even the first time we have a story about jealous brothers in the Quran. Right? There's the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, whose brothers were also jealous of him and who got rid of him because they thought that he was favored by his father. So this is a familiar story. We have Qabil here who feels that he has been done wrong. He has been wronged. That he has been treated unfairly. That Habil gets all that critical acclaim. He gets all the love, all the affection, all the priorities, and Qabil is left behind. He's left in the dirt. Now as is usually the case with someone who experiences this sort of burning jealousy, they never ascribe their shortcomings or their failures to themselves. They're always looking for a scapegoat, someone else to take the blame. So the thinking goes, if only he wasn't there, if only she wasn't there, then my father or my mother or whoever else, they would pay attention to me. So what's the solution? Not to get better, not to improve myself, but to get rid of or to drag down my rival. If only they would be out of the picture, everyone would appreciate me more. If only my brother didn't get higher grades than me, my father would appreciate me more. If only my sister didn't get a better job than me, my family would appreciate me more, etc., etc. And this doesn't just apply to siblings, but to best friends, and here's the fascinating thing. This sort of powerful jealousy, it usually arises not with acquaintances, but with people who are very, very close. Right? I mean, say for example, you're an aspiring novelist. Maybe you're jealous of J.K. Rowling for producing, for being a millionaire, for having all this best-selling series of books. If you're a software engineer or a computer scientist, maybe you're jealous of Bill Gates for his success, but that jealousy is unlikely to be very strong, right? It's just that it's sort of a vague jealousy. Oh, I wish I could have that. But you don't feel that strongly. You feel jealousy much more strongly when it involves someone whom you know personally, someone with whom you have a close relationship. So when it's your brother or your sister or your friend or your brother-in-law, when they succeed, when they have something that you don't have, that's when the jealousy burns. Right? That's when it begins to eat away at your soul, because that's when it feels threatening. That's when it feels threatening to you. Because we went to the same school, we lived in the same neighborhood, we were in the same household, and yet now we have different fates in life, and that's not fair. Right? So when it's someone close to you, that's when envy is much more powerful. What we see here in Qabil is what we observed in Iblis during the story of Prophet Adam alayhi salam. If we recall, Iblis's disease of the heart, what caused him to reject the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what caused him to be expelled and cast down, was his hunger for recognition. He needed to be acknowledged as the best. And again, there's a familiar desire. Each and every single one of us, we have something of this desire in us. I want people to praise me, to say, MashaAllah, look at him, look how pious he is, look how successful he is, look how much money he has, look how much academic success he's had. We want people to praise us, to recognize us. So Iblis, he wanted that recognition, and he felt that he wasn't getting it, and he felt that it wasn't fair that Adam got it, that Adam alayhi salam got it. He wanted that recognition for himself. So he was obsessed with comparison. He had to keep comparing himself to others, and he hated to see that anyone should compare favorably to himself. So Iblis here, we see the first human being who follows the same exact path. The first of many. This is the same, this impulse for comparison, this hunger for status and praise, this is the same disease of the heart that was driving Qabil, that was driving him. And so it fermented and festered in his heart. And he directed all of his anger and all of his hatred towards Habil. Because he saw him as the reason for it. He saw him as the problem. So again, here I'm going to reiterate the distinction that we discussed a few weeks back between jealousy and envy. Right? Between jealousy and envy. Envy is not just when you want something that someone has, but that you hope that they lose what they have. So it's not enough that you have that same thing, they have to lose it. So you want to be elevated, and you want them to be cast down. It's a zero-sum game. We can't both have something good. It's either me or you. Right? This is the mindset of someone who is suffering from envy. Right? So no, either I have that job or you have that job. I hope I get that job, and I hope that you get fired. Right? You have that beautiful voice when you recite the Quran. I hope that you lose your voice and that I get that voice. You got admitted into that college. I hope that you get expelled from that college and I get admitted to it. So it's a posture of hostility. You can't accept that you both can share something good. No, it's you, it's me or you. Right? So it's a war mentality. This is in contradiction to someone who is jealous. Right? If you're jealous, your jealousy doesn't necessarily have to be toxic. It doesn't have to be poisonous. Right? You can see someone who Allah has blessed with something, and you can say, well, mashallah, I hope that one day I can have that. I hope that one day I can have that job, or have that talent, have that ability to write well, or draw well, or recite well. I hope I can excel in the same way this person has excelled. You can look at what other people have, and that can motivate you to be better. In which case, this is a good jealousy. Right? This is actually a healthy jealousy. So that's very different from envy, from hasad. Right? Envy is what's prohibited. And the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, he warned us about envy. He said, beware of envy because it burns away your good deeds the same way that fire burns away wood. The way fire burns away wood. The envy has the same corrosive impact on us. So this is what drove Qabil. And so imagine it came to the point This envy festered and grew and grew and grew and grew until eventually it came out. Right? This didn't happen overnight. Right? The same way that Iblis's hatred and his envy, that didn't just pop up out of nowhere. That was fermenting for a long time, and it was the creation of Adam alayhi salam that brought it out. That made it explicit, made it public. So the same way, this was the turning point. This was the breaking point for Qabil. So he had already been jealous of his brother before they offered their sacrifice. But after his was rejected, now his envy boiled over. And so he goes to Qabil, he goes to Habil, and he tells him, I'm going to kill you. He makes his malicious intent known. I hate you so much, I am actually going to kill you. And this is a major moment in human history, because the idea of killing someone, this had never happened. Right? Murder as an idea, as an action, had never took place. So Qabil here, he's inventing the idea of murder, of a human being taking the life of another human being. So he's in this extremely dark place, following the path of Iblis. And so he tells Qabil, I am going to kill you. And what's the response? So he tells Habil, I'm going to kill you. And what's the response of Habil? Right? I mean, he says, and it's a very pointed response. He doesn't say, oh no, don't kill me, or he doesn't say, oh no, I'm sorry. No, he says, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah accepts from those who have taqwa. So there's an implicit accusation in that response. Habil is telling Qabil, well, reflect on why your offering, why your sacrifice was rejected. Do you have taqwa? He's reminding his brother. Reflect, think about yourself. Instead of coming at me, threatening to kill me, why don't you think about your own position, about your own relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do you have taqwa? So Habil is challenging Qabil. He's telling him, well, how about you? You're threatening me, how about you? So Habil is trying to help his brother here. Right? He's trying to direct his attention towards the real source of the problem, which is himself. So what follows after this is a very interesting conversation between Habil and Qabil. And so inshallah, that's we're going to review and reflect on the meanings of this conversation next week, inshallah. Wa jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.